The knife slipped from Dean's hand, clattering against the porcelain sink like a confession he couldn't hold back any longer. Blood welled up from the shallow cut on his thumb, mixing with the soapy water in crimson swirls. But it was nothing compared to the ache in his chest, the one that had festered since the day his dad found those letters. "You think this is love?" Tom's voice had rasped back then, crumpling the pages in his fist, his eyes not meeting Dean's, as if looking would make it real. Carl's hand caught his wrist before he could plunge it back into the dishwater, pulling him close in the dim light of their Brooklyn apartment. "Dean, stop. You're punishing yourself for something that's not your fault." But even as Carl's lips brushed his temple, Dean felt the ghost of those words, his own, inked in youthful desperation, burning like they'd been set aflame. Dean had always known his dad carried secrets like old war wounds, the kind that never fully healed but left you limping through life anyway. Tom Whitaker was a man forged in the Rust Belt fires of Detroit, where assembly lines hummed like judgmental preachers and men didn't cry, didn't question, didn't love wrong. He'd raised Dean alone after Dean's mom skipped town when he was 5, chasing some dream of Hollywood glamour that turned out to be a dive bar in Reno. Tom worked double shifts at the auto plant, came home smelling of grease and regret, and taught his son that real men fixed what was broken: cars, roofs, silences. By the time Dean hit 18, he was already sketching escape routes on napkins during family barbecues in their cramped backyard in Dearborn, Michigan. The air always hung heavy with charcoal smoke and the low murmur of aunts gossiping about neighbors who'd gone liberal. Dean's sketches weren't of carburetors or football plays. They were of boys, faceless at first, then sharper, with jawlines that cut like switchblades and eyes that promised more than the hollow cheers of high school pep rallies. He'd met Carl online, in the anonymous glow of a chat room for guys too scared to wave a flag at the Pride Parade. Carl was 22, a barista-slash-aspiring photographer from Queens, with a laugh that crackled like summer thunder and tattoos snaking up his arms like road maps to places Dean had only dreamed of. Their first messages were cautious. "You into indie bands? Seen that new flick with the queer leads?" But by week 3, Dean was spilling guts he didn't know he had, typing feverishly on his ancient desktop while Tom snored in the next room. The letters came later, after Dean scraped together bus fare for a weekend in New York. He couldn't afford a plane ticket, so he rode Greyhound for 20 hours, wedged between a snoring trucker and a woman clutching rosary beads. Carl met him at Port Authority, all rumpled flannel and that grin that made Dean's knees buckle. They wandered the village hand in hidden hand, stealing glances at couples who didn't have to hide, and when the sun dipped behind the brownstones, Dean felt something crack open inside him, like a rusted lock finally giving way. Back in Michigan, with the high of those 3 days fading like cheap ink, Dean started writing. Not emails, those felt too ephemeral, too easy to delete. He bought a stack of pale blue stationery from the drugstore, the kind with faint lines that guided his hand like a confessor. The first one began, "Carl, last night I dreamed of your hands again. Not just on my skin, but mapping out the parts of me I've kept buried since I was a kid pretending to like girls at sock hops." He poured it all out. The terror of coming out to Tom, the way church sermons on Sodom twisted in his gut, the ache of loving someone in a town where rainbows were just weather warnings. He mailed the first batch from a post office in Ann Arbor, heart hammering as he dropped them into the slot. Carl's replies came like lifelines, typed on his ancient typewriter, smelling faintly of coffee grounds and darkroom chemicals. "Dean, your words are the only map I need. Come back soon. The city's colder without you." They traded letters like contraband, Dean hiding his under the floorboard in his closet, right next to the dog-eared copy of Giovanni's Room he'd smuggled from the library. It was a humid July evening when everything splintered. Dean was home from his summer gig at the local diner, flipping burgers for minimum wage and dodging questions from regulars about, "That nice girl you seeing?" Tom had come in early from the plant, his coveralls streaked with oil, a six-pack dangling from one hand. Dean was in his room, sealing another envelope, when the floorboard creaked under Tom's boot. "What the hell is this?" Tom's voice was gravel and thunder. The letters fanned out in his meaty palm like evidence in a trial. Dean's stomach dropped, the room tilting as he lunged for them. But Tom held them high, his face a mask of something darker than anger. Disgust, maybe, laced with the kind of sorrow that comes from realizing your blueprint for manhood was flawed. Dad, it's not. Give them back. Dean's voice cracked, boyish and pleading. But Tom just stared, the silence stretching taut as a wire. You think this is what I raised you for? Some fairy tale bullshit. The word landed like a slap, the slur Dean had heard whispered in locker rooms but never from the man who was supposed to have his back. Tom crumpled the letters, shoving them into his pocket like they were toxic. This stays here. You burn this crap out of you or so help me, Dean. He didn't finish the threat, just turned and stormed out, leaving Dean on his knees amid the scattered stationery. That night, Dean lay awake, the summer cicadas screaming outside his window like accusations. He texted Carl at dawn. He knows. It's over. But Carl called, his voice a steady anchor. No, it's not. We're not done. Pack a bag. I'm coming to get you. The drive back to New York was a blur of cornfields and billboards for Jesus Saves. Carl's old Chevy rattling like it might give up any minute. Dean clutched the glove compartment, silent tears carving tracks down his dust-streaked cheeks. When they crossed the George Washington Bridge, the skyline rising like a promise, Carl pulled over and kissed him fierce and slow. This is home now, he murmured against Dean's lips. We'll build it letter by letter if we have to. They did, in a walk-up in Bushwick where the walls were thin and the rent was thinner. Carl's photography gigs paid for film and takeout. Dean enrolled at community college, studying graphic design by day and waiting tables by night. The letters evolved, less desperate, more defiant. Carl, today I sketched us on the subway. You with that lens in your hand, me with my head on your shoulder, and no one batting an eye. It's real here. They framed one on the wall, a love note turned artifact, right next to Carl's first gallery print. But Tom haunted the edges. Holiday cards arrived and signed, postmarked from Dearborn, containing nothing but a $20 bill and a silence louder than any sermon. Dean wrote back once, a single page. Dad, I love him. It's not a phase. It's me. No reply. The family grapevine buzzed. Aunt Linda's emails hinting at Tom's heartbreak. Uncle Ray's gruff. He's praying for you, kid. Dean stopped reading them, but the wound suppurated. A low-grade fever he couldn't shake. 2 years in, on a crisp October afternoon, Carl proposed in Prospect Park. Not with a ring, too broke for that, but with a Polaroid of them tangled in sheets, backs to the camera, the city lights blurring behind. Marry me? Carl asked, voice thick. Not legal yet everywhere. But hell, in our hearts? Dean said yes through laughter and snot, and they celebrated with cheap whiskey on the fire escape, toasting to futures unwritten. Word trickled back to Michigan via Aunt Linda's relentless Facebook stalking. Tom's fit to be tied. She wrote in an email Dean almost deleted unread. Says it's a phase, but deep down. Well, you know your father. Dean did. Tom, who'd buried his own queer cousin in the family closet after a tragic fall in the 70s. Whispers of scandal hushed at reunions. History repeating, ink on blue paper. As Thanksgiving loomed, the annual Whitaker clan gathering in Dearborn, a ritual of turkey and tension since Dean could walk. Carl pushed. We go or we don't. But if we do, no more hiding. Dean's gut twisted. The thought of facing Tom, of the aunt's pitying glances, made him nauseous. But Carl was right. The letters Tom had hidden weren't just words. They were Dean's declaration of war on silence. They booked the flight, Dean's hands shaking as he clicked, confirm. In the weeks leading up, he dreamed of the kitchen sink again. Blood in the water, Tom's fist closing around those pages. Waking sweat-soaked beside Carl, he'd whisper, "What if he never forgives?" Carl would pull him close. Forgiveness isn't the goal. Truth is. The plane touched down in Detroit on a gray November dawn, the air biting like judgment. Aunt Linda scooped them up in her minivan, chattering about pies and cousins, her eyes darting to their laced fingers on the console. Your dad's. Reserved, she said finally, voice lilting with apology. But he's glad you're coming. All of you. The old house on Elm Street hadn't changed. Sagging porch, the flagpole creaking in the wind, Tom's truck parked crooked in the drive. He stood in the doorway as they climbed the steps, flannel shirt tucked into jeans worn thin at the knees, his face a roadmap of lines etched deeper since Dean's departure. "Boys," he grunted, the word neutral as a weather report, stepping aside to let them in. The living room smelled of sage and simmering gravy, cousins tumbling like puppies, little Mia with her gap-toothed grin, teenage Jake hiding behind his phone. Hugs were doled out, backslaps for Carl like he was just the roommate. But Dean caught the flicker in Tom's eyes, the way he avoided the matching leather jackets slung over the couch. Dinner was a minefield. The table groaned under platters. Aunt Linda's cornbread, Uncle Ray's lumpy mashed potatoes, Tom's carved bird gleaming like a truce offering. Conversation skirted edges, jobs in the city, the Lions' losing streak, Mia's school play. Dean's throat tightened with every forced laugh, Carl's knee a steady press against his under the table. Then, as pie was sliced, Carl cleared his throat. The room hushed, forks pausing midair. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a slim bundle tied with twine. The letters, salvaged from a box in Tom's attic during a quick look around while Dean napped. Dean's heart stuttered. He'd thought them ashes long ago. "Tom," Carl said, voice even as a summer lake. "Dean's told me about these, how you kept them safe." Tom's fork clattered, his knuckles whitening. Aunts exchanged glances. Uncle Ray coughed into his napkin. Carl untied the bundle, unfolding the top page with deliberate care. "I think it's time we heard them. For real this time." The air in the dining room thickened, heavy as the fog rolling off Lake Erie that time Dean and Carl had driven up to Mackinac for a weekend getaway, chasing ghosts of what a normal life might feel like. Back then, bundled in wool coats against the chill, they'd walked the straits hand in hand, the bridge arching like a silver promise overhead. "Someday," Dean had said, breath fogging the air, "we'll bring the family here. No secrets." Carl had squeezed his hand. "Someday starts now." But now, in the Whitaker dining room with its wallpaper peeling at the seams and the cuckoo clock ticking like a bomb, someday had crashed into today. Carl's fingers trembled slightly. Not from fear, Dean knew, but from the weight of wielding someone else's vulnerability like a shield. Tom's face had gone the color of the gravy boat's congealed dregs. His jaw set in that familiar line, the one that said storms coming batten down. "Carl, don't," Dean whispered, his own voice a traitor, small and pleading. But part of him, the part that had scripted escape routes on napkins, yearned for the detonation. The aunts leaned in, curiosity warring with discomfort. Uncle Ray shifted in his chair, muttering about passing the coffee. Carl ignored them all. His eyes locked on Tom as he smoothed the paper. "This one's from 3 years ago," he said, voice carrying the lilt of Queen's streets, unpolished and real. "Dear Carl, the subway rattle sounds like my heartbeat when you're not here. Jerking starts and stops, always one track behind. Last night, I closed my eyes and saw us in that diner off Flatbush. Your thumb tracing the scar on my knuckle from the time I punched the mirror after Dad's call. You said, 'Let it shatter, we'll pick the pieces.' God, I love you for that, for seeing the cracks and calling them art." A gasp rippled, soft from Aunt Linda, sharper from Cousin Sarah, who'd brought her new baby and a stack of onesies monogrammed with tiny flags. Mia, oblivious, colored on her placemat, her crayons scribbling rainbows that clashed with the room's sudden pallor. Dean's cheeks burned, a flush creeping up his neck like the whiskey they'd shared on that fire escape, the night Carl proposed with a Polaroid instead of a ring. Tom's chair scraped back an inch, the legs gouging the linoleum like claws. "Enough," he growled, low and ragged, the word laced with the same gravel that had narrated Dean's childhood bedtime stories, of brave soldiers and unyielding steel. But this wasn't a story. It was indictment. Carl didn't flinch. He turned the page, his free hand finding Dean's under the tablecloth, fingers interlacing like roots seeking soil. "I wrote this after the first time we fought, about me not calling home, about the letters you said I should send anyway. You were right. Silence is the real killer. Dad found them once, hid them like they were poison. Maybe they are to him. But to me, they're oxygen. Carl, you're the first person who made me believe love isn't a debt I owe, but a fire I get to tend. The room fractured then, not with shouts but with the quiet unraveling of facades. Uncle Ray cleared his throat, pushing back his plate with a clink. Look, boys, this is private, family stuff. But his eyes darted to Tom, pleading for the patriarch to douse the flames. Aunt Linda dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, the fabric blooming red from cranberry stains. Oh, Tommy, she murmured, reaching across the table, but he jerked away, his gaze fixed on the letters like they were a grenade pin pulled. Dean couldn't breathe. The words, his words, hung in the air, naked and unapologetic, stripping him bare in front of the people who'd changed his diapers and cheered his touchdowns. He'd imagined this moment 1,000 times on sleepless nights in the Bushwick walk-up, Carl's arm slung over him like a ward against the dark. But fantasy hadn't prepared him for the raw edge of it. The way Tom's Adam's apple bobbed, fighting tears or rage, Dean couldn't tell. Why now? Tom finally rasped, his voice a whisper that sliced through the hush. He didn't look at Dean, not directly. His eyes skittered to Carl, then to the window where bare oaks clawed at the November sky. After all this time, you come here to parade this. Carl set the letter down gently, like laying a body to rest. Not parading, Tom. Honoring. Dean wrote these because he couldn't say it out loud. Not to you, not then. But he's saying it now. We're saying it. The weight of we landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading. Cousin Jake, usually glued to his screen, pocketed his phone, his teenage awkwardness melting into something softer. It's cool, Uncle Tom. Like, really cool. Mia looked up from her drawing. Are they like princes in a story, Daddy? Sarah shushed her, but the damage was done, or the healing begun, depending on where you stood. Dean pulled his hand free, standing on legs that felt like overcooked noodles. Dad, he said, the word tasting foreign after years of avoidance. I didn't write them to hurt you. I wrote them because without Carl, I'd still be that kid hiding under floorboards. Tom's face crumpled just for a second. A flash of the man who'd bandaged Dean's knees after bike wrecks, who'd hummed off-key to Motown on car rides to Little League. Then the mask slammed back, jaw clenched, eyes steel. You think I hid them to hurt you? I hid them to save you. This world, it chews up boys like you, spits 'em out broken. I saw it with Uncle Frank. Drank himself dead after the family turned on him. The admission hung there, a bombshell wrapped in confession. Uncle Frank, the tragic fall. The empty chair at reunions, the photo in the attic album with his face scratched out. Dean had pieced it together in whispers, but hearing it from Tom's lips was like exhaling after holding breath for decades. You mean, you knew? Dean's voice broke, the room spinning. Tom nodded once, sharp as a piston. Knew and buried it. Same as I'll bury this. He shoved back from the table, chair toppling with a crash that sent Mia squealing. The back door slammed behind him, the cold rushing in like an uninvited guest. Chaos erupted in his wake. Linda fussing over the pie, Ray pouring bourbon into coffee mugs, Sarah bundling Mia upstairs with promises of cartoons. Carl gathered the letters, tucking them into his pocket, his other arm wrapping around Dean's waist. You okay? He murmured, lips to Dean's ear. Dean shook his head, tears hot on his lashes. No, but, yeah, maybe. They stepped out onto the porch, the night air crisp with the scent of wood smoke from neighbors' chimneys. Tom was by the garage, silhouetted against the sodium glow of the street lamp, wrenching at something under the hood of his truck. Always fixing, never facing. Dean's chest ached with the familiarity of it, the way Tom's shoulders hunched like they carried the weight of 2 lifetimes. Give him time, Carl said. But Dean was already moving, boots crunching on frost-kissed gravel. Dad. The word echoed, swallowed by the wind. Tom didn't turn, his hands black with grease, knuckles split. Go back inside, Dean. It's cold. It's always cold here. Dean shot back, the bitterness surprising even him. You made sure of that. Tom straightened, wiping his hands on a rag that looked as old as their grudge. What do you want me to say? That I'm proud? That this? He gestured vaguely toward Carl, lingering in the doorway. This is what I dreamed for my boy. I wanted you to say anything. Dean's voice rose, cracking the night's quiet. Instead, you hid my heart in your pocket like trash. Tom's laugh was bitter, a bark without humor. Trash? I kept 'em, didn't I? In the cigar box under the workbench. Read 'em every damn night after you left, wondering where I went wrong. The revelation hit like a sucker punch. Dean sagged against the truck, the metal cold through his sweater. You read them. Every word. Tom's eyes finally met his, red-rimmed and raw. Beautiful they were. Broke me more than the plant layoffs ever did. But love like that, it don't fit in Dearborn. It just gets you killed. Not anymore, Carl interjected softly, stepping forward, his presence a bridge in the chasm. Not for us. Tom eyed him, assessing, the rag twisting in his fists. You got stones, kid. Dragging this out in front of the whole damn clan. Had to, Carl replied, unflinching. Dean's carried it long enough. Silence stretched, broken only by the distant hum of I-94. Then Tom sighed, a deflation like a tire going flat. Come inside. Turkey's gettin' cold. It wasn't absolution, not yet. But as they filed back in, the door clicking shut against the wind, Dean felt the first thaw. The ants had cleared the wreckage, plates stacked neat, but the air hummed with unspoken shifts. Jake clapped Dean on the back. Those letters? Epic, man. Linda pressed pie into their hands, her hug lingering. That night, in Dean's old room with its faded Wolverines posters and creaky twin bed, Carl and Dean curled together under quilts that smelled of mothballs and memory. You were brave, Carl whispered, tracing the scar on Dean's knuckle. We were, Dean corrected, pressing a kiss to Carl's palm. Sleep came fitful, dreams tangled with ink and grease. But when dawn broke, filtering through frost-laced panes, Dean woke to the smell of bacon frying downstairs. Tom was at the stove, spatula in hand, not meeting eyes as he slid plates across the formica. Eat, he grunted. Flight's at noon. It was a start, a greasy, bacon-scented olive branch. As they drove to the airport, Tom silent in the driver's seat, Dean pulled the letters from Carl's pocket. Keep these, he said, pressing them into Tom's hand at the curb. Read 'em again. Out loud, this time. Tom's fingers closed around them, the bundle vanishing into his coat like a secret reclaimed. Get on the plane, son. Dean did, buckling in beside Carl, the runway blurring as they lifted off. Below, Dearborn shrank to patches of gray and green, the Whitaker house a speck holding his history. Think he'll do it? Carl asked, hand warm on Dean's thigh. Dean leaned his head on Carl's shoulder, the hum of engines a lullaby. Yeah, someday. Back in Brooklyn, the city swallowed them whole, a concrete embrace that muffled the echoes of Dearborn's revelations. Their walk-up felt smaller somehow, the walls pressing in with the scent of street falafel and exhaust. But it was home. Their home, built on late-night confessions and Polaroids pinned like medals. Dean threw himself into finals at Pratt, his graphic design projects blooming with color he hadn't dared before. Posters for queer art walks, logos for a trans support hotline, each stroke a defiance of the grayscale Michigan winters. Carl's darkroom expanded into a side hustle, his photos landing in a zine called Outlines. Raw portraits of couples and stolen moments, hands intertwined under diner counters, lips brushing in alley shadows. This one's you, he'd say, tacking a print of Dean laughing mid-bite of a hot dog in Coney Island, wind whipping his hair like freedom. But beneath the buzz, a undercurrent pulled. Tom's silence, thicker now, laced with the weight of those letters. Christmas came garish and glittering, the village decked in wreaths and rainbow lights that twinkled like winks from old friends. They hosted a potluck, queer chosen family crammed into the living room. Marisol with her killer empanadas, Theo the drag king with stories taller than his heels, and Lena, Carl's ex-roommate, who baked cookies shaped like middle fingers to heteronormativity. Laughter ricocheted off the peeling paint, toast sloshed with spiked eggnog, and for a night, Dean forgot the ache. But mid-January, a package arrived, unmarked, postmarked Detroit. Dean's hands shook as he sliced the tape, Carl hovering like a shadow. Inside, the blue stationery bundle, pristine now, interleaved with crisp white sheets in Tom's blocky scrawl. The first letter was Dean's own, but beside it, Tom's response. Son, I read this one again last night. The part about the subway reminds me of the L in Chicago, back when your ma and I were young. Thought love was simple then. Guess it's not. Burned supper thinking on it. Dad. Dean's throat closed, tears blurring the ink. Carl read over his shoulder, his intake of breath sharp. He's trying. One by one, they unfolded the exchange. Tom's notes terse at first. This one's got fire, like your granddad's war stories, easing into vulnerability. Frank wrote letters too to a fella in the Navy. Never sent 'em. Wish I could tell him it's okay now. The final page, undated. Proud of you, Dean, even if it chokes me to say it. Bring the city boy for Memorial Day. We'll grill. Dean clutched the papers to his chest, a sob ripping free. Carl pulled him down to the futon, holding him through the storm. Ugly cries that left snot on flannel, hiccups echoing in the empty hall. He sees you, Carl murmured, rocking gently. Finally. Spring unfurled in cherry blossoms and subway serenades. Dean's portfolio earning him an internship at a Soho ad firm. Carl's zine going viral after a Out magazine shout-out. They splurged on a weekend in the Finger Lakes, renting a cabin where loons called across the water like lost lovers. There, under a quilt of stars, Dean traced Carl's tattoos. Compass roses and swallow wings, and whispered, "Marry me for real? When it's legal everywhere." Carl's grin split the dark. Thought you'd never ask. But joy's underbelly is shadow, and there's crept in with a call from Aunt Linda in May. Tommy's sick, she said, voice wobbling over the line. Prostate. Docs say it's early, but he's stubborn as ever. Asks about you boys every day. Dean's world tilted, the internship sketches scattering like leaves. Tom, indestructible Tom, who fixed transmissions with duct tape and sheer will, brought low by cells he couldn't wrench into submission. We'll go, he told Carl that night, packing a duffel with shaking hands. Memorial Day, like he said. The drive to Dearborn was a rerun in reverse. Cornfields greening now, billboards hawking fireworks instead of salvation. Tom looked smaller in his recliner when they arrived, flannel hanging loose on shoulders once broad as barn doors. But his grip on Dean's hand was iron. Heard you got that fancy job, he grunted, eyes crinkling. Drawin' pictures for queers? Dean laughed, watery. For everyone, Dad. But yeah, mostly queers. Carl hung back, unpacking cooler of craft beers. None of that Keystone Light crap. Earning a nod from Tom that passed for approval. The backyard grill smoked with burgers and brats. Uncle Ray manning tongs while Linda fussed over salads. Jake, now sporting a fresh undercut, cornered Dean by the cooler. Read those letters online. Zines are wild, man. You should collab with Carl. As dusk fell, fireflies winking like errant thoughts, Tom pulled Dean aside to the garage. The cigar box sat open on the workbench. Letters mingled with chemo pamphlets and a dog-eared Reader's Digest. Wrote you another, Tom said, thrusting a folded sheet. Dean's fingers unfolded it under the bare bulb. Dean, if I kick it before this cancer does. No, I was wrong. Hiding those words was cowardice. Yours are brave. Love's a tough engine, but you boys got it purring. Fix what breaks. Dad. Dean folded it away, throat tight. You're not kicking anything. We're fighting this. Tom clapped his shoulder, the touch lingering. With you? Yeah. Summer blurred. Weekends shuttling between burrows and bedside. Dean sketching treatment timelines while Carl documented it all in photos. Tom's wry grins amid 4 drips. The family clustered like wildflowers around his hospital bed. August brought remission whispers, the docs optimistic, and Dean dared hope. Then betrayal slithered in, insidious as fog. It started with a letter, not blue stationery, but crisp bond from a Dearborn lawyer. Aunt Linda forwarded it, her note apologetic. Found this in Tommy's things. He didn't want you hurt, but, oh Dean. The words swam. Tom's will, revised post-diagnosis, leaving the house to Uncle Ray to keep the family legacy intact. No mention of Dean. No provision for alternative lifestyles. A codicil buried deep. Should my son persist in his choices, the estate passes to preserve Whitaker values. Dean's hands went numb, the paper crumpling in his fist. Carl found him on the fire escape, knees to chest, staring at the skyline like it owed him answers. He promised, Dean choked. After everything, the letters, the visits, he still. Carl sank beside him, arm a steel band. It's fear, not hate. Cancer's got him grasping at ghosts. But the wound festered. Dean confronted Tom over Labor Day weekend. The backyard barbecue a farce of char and cheer. Dad, the will. What the hell? Tom's face shuddered, fork pausing over ribs. The family hushed, sensing the squall. It's practical, son. Ray's got kids. He'll carry the name. The name. Dean's voice cracked like thunder. I'm your son. After the letters, after you said. I said proud. Tom cut in, low and fierce. Not stupid. This town's changing slow. I won't leave you a target. Bullshit. Dean stood, chair scraping. It's betrayal. Hiding the letters was one thing. This is erasure. Tom's eyes flashed. Anger, shame, the old steel. You left, Dean. Chose your city lights over family. Carl rose then, hand on Dean's arm, but his words were for Tom. He chose life. You could too. The argument spilled into the night, voices echoing off the garage, ending with Dean storming to the truck, Carl trailing with apologies to Linda. The drive back was silence, broken only by Dean's sobs, Carl's hand steady on the wheel. Fall leaves turned blood red as betrayal's bruise deepened. Dean threw himself into work, designed sharper, angrier. Campaigns for queer youth shelters, billboards screaming you are seen. Carl's photos turned introspective. A series called Hidden Engines. Tom's truck a recurring motif, hood up, guts exposed. Thanksgiving loomed again, the anniversary of that first reading. Invites came tentative. Linda's email pleading, he misses you. Come heal. Dean deleted it, then fished it from trash. One more shot, he told Carl over takeout lo mein. For the letters. But doubt gnawed. What if Tom's proud was just pity, the notes a deathbed dodge? Dean dreamed of the sink again, blood swirling. But now Tom's hand held the knife. The flight to Detroit felt like crossing into enemy territory. The cabin pressure a metaphor for the compression in Dean's chest. Carl squeezed his hand during turbulence, his thumb rubbing circles like a talisman. Whatever happens, he murmured. We walk out whole. Dean nodded, but his mind replayed the will's cold legalese. Each clause a barb. Legacy, values, persist. Persist. Like his love was a glitch to debug. Aunt Linda's minivan idled at baggage claim, her smile strained as she hugged them tight. He's been asking for you, she said, eyes glassy. Won't admit it, but the chemo's kicking his ass. Makes a man reflective. The house on Elm Street sagged wearier now, porch light flickering like a dying star, the flag limp in the late November drizzle. Inside, the air was thick with turkey brine and unspoken dread. Cousins milled, Jake taller, Mia's braids adorned with turkey feathers from school crafts. But the energy crackled brittle, like dry tinder. Tom held court from the recliner, thinner but unbowed. A knit Afghan draped over his lap like a surrender flag. Boys, he greeted, voice a rasp from the radiation's toll. His eyes lingered on Dean, searching, then flicked to Carl with a nod that held less frost than before. Heard your pictures are in some fancy mag, good on ya. Dinner assembled in fits. Uncle Ray carving with exaggerated flair, Sarah passing peas while cooing at the baby. Conversation danced on eggshells. Weather, Wolverine's slim playoff chances, Mia's recitation of the pledge with a lisp that charmed even the tension. Dean picked at his plate, the cranberry sauce tart on his tongue, Carl's foot nudging his in silent solidarity. As coffee steamed and pie crumbs dusted laps, the moment crested. No fanfare. Carl simply reached into his messenger bag, the bundle emerging like a relic from a dig. The letters, augmented now, Tom's responses interleaved like a dialogue long overdue. The room stilled, forks hovering, breaths held. "Last year," Carl began, voice steady as Brooklyn bedrock. "We started something here. Truth, raw and unfiltered. Thought we'd circle back." He glanced at Tom, invitation laced with challenge. "Your turn to read one, maybe?" Tom's hand trembled as he accepted the stack, knuckles gnarled like oak roots. The family leaned in, a collective inhale. Mia wide-eyed, Jake filming discreetly on his phone. Tom's gaze dropped to the top page, Dean's script looping elegant beside his own block print. He cleared his throat, the sound gravelly. "Dear Carl, Dad's sick. I flew home today," sat by his bed smelling of bleach and regret. He looked at me, not through me, and said, "You turned out all right. That's code, for I love you. But the will, God, it gutted me. Like all the letters in the world can't rewrite blood." Tom paused, his voice catching on gutted, eyes lifting to Dean's. Moisture glistened, unashamed. "I want to hate him for it, for choosing ghosts over me. But I see it now, the fear that's eaten him hollow. We're both Whitaker men. Fixers, not feelers. Help me feel this, Carl. Help me fight for us." The words landed soft as snow, but they buried the room in their weight. Aunt Linda sniffled into her sleeve, Uncle Ray's Adam's apple working overtime. Sarah rocked the baby faster, a lullaby against the ache. Dean's vision blurred, the table a watercolor of half-eaten feast and fractured family. Tom set the letter down, his own edition unfolding in shaking hands. "Dean, reading yours again tonight. The one about the fire, love as something to tend. I've let mine gutter too long. The will's bullshit. Tore it up last week. House is yours, joint with Ray, no strings. No more hiding. Proud don't cover it. You're my son. Love you. Dad." Gasps rippled. Aunt Linda's hand flying to her mouth. Jake's phone dipping in shock. Dean's heart stuttered, a dam breaking behind his ribs. He stood, chair whispering back, rounding the table to Tom's side. The embrace was awkward, bony shoulders under flannel, the Afghan tangling their legs. But it was real, Tom's arms clamping like vices. A sob muffled in Dean's hair. "I'm sorry," Tom whispered, hot against his ear. "For the hiding, for the will, for being a coward." Dean clung tighter, snotting on the knit. "I love you, Dad. Letters and all." The room exhaled then, a collective release. Hugs cascaded. Linda enveloping them both. Ray's backslap landing on Carl with gruff affection. "You got balls, son." Mia clambered up, demanding, "Read mine next." And Jake pocketed his phone with a grin. Viral gold, but private. Pie resumed in earnest, laughter bubbling tentative. Then free stories of Thanksgivings past. Uncle Frank's infamous Jell-O salad that once wobbled off the table. Carl read next, his voice weaving Dean's words like a spell. Tales of subway dreams and fire-tended loves. Tom's notes punctuating like harmonies. As plates cleared, the family migrated to the living room. Fire crackling in the grate. Tom had installed himself. Dean and Carl curled on the couch, legs tangled, while Tom held court from his chair, a tumbler of bourbon in hand. Not spiked coffee, but the good stuff, shared rounds. "To fixin' what breaks," he toasted, glass raised to the letters on the coffee table. Now a centerpiece amid pecan shells. Night deepened, cousins bedding down in sleeping bags, the house alive with snores and whispers. Dean and Carl slipped out to the porch, breath fogging in the chill, stars pricking the velvet sky. "You did it," Dean murmured, forehead to Carl's. "Pulled the pin." "We did." Carl's kiss was slow, tasting of pumpkin and promise. "Now what?" Dean grinned, wicked in the moonlight. Now we live it. Inside, Tom's voice drifted soft. Reading to Mia, his gravel lilt turning Dean's words to bedtime magic. And they loved fierce, like engines roaring down open roads. Winter wrapped Dearborn in ermine and ice, but the Whitaker house glowed warmer that year. Strings of LEDs twinkling from the eaves like stars claimed for Earth. Dean and Carl shuttled between coasts less frantically now. Tom's treatments a rhythm rather than a rush, his color returning with each clear scan. Memorial Day became ritual. The backyard grill eternal. Beers cracked for Uncle Ray's bad jokes. Mia's drawings of 2 princes and a king, taped to the fridge. Dean thrived in the hyphen of lives. Soho days sketching ad campaigns that snuck queer subtext into cereal boxes. Bushwick nights developing Carl's film in their upgraded darkroom. A corner of the loft they'd rented after Dean's first bonus. Carl's Hidden Engines series sold out at a Chelsea gallery. Tom's truck immortalized in silver gelatin. Hood agape like a confession. Betrayal scar faded to silver. Tom's ripped will a talisman in the cigar box. Now displayed on the mantel beside Dean's letters. Blue and white pages fanned like a deck of truths. Read one every Sunday, Tom declared over Father's Day brunch, his voice stronger, fork spearing eggs Benedict with renewed gusto. Keeps the rust off. But life's engine sputters, and Tom's did in late summer, a complication, the doc said, infection from a weakened line. Dean flew solo that time, Carl tied to a deadline, landing in Detroit as rain lashed the tarmac. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and wilted carnations. Tom hooked to monitors beeping like accusatory metronomes. You came, Tom rasped, hand frail in Dean's grasp. Always. Dean pulled the chair close, the letters tucked in his jacket like armor. Brought these. Tom's chuckle wheezed. Persistent bugger. Read me one, yours not mine. Dean unfolded a fresh one, penned in the waiting lounge. Dad? You're the blueprint I built on. Even the flawed lines. Carl says love's an engine. Yours runs quiet now but steady. We're tuning it together. He read on. Of hospital vigils and Carl's photos capturing Tom's wry grins. Of Mia's crayon cards cluttering the sill. Tom's eyes drifted shut. Breath evening. Proud son. Tell your man. Thanks for the readin'. Dawn broke with news. Stable. Transferred to hospice for comfort. The family rotated shifts, Linda's prayers mingling with Ray's sports radio, Sarah's lullabies for the baby echoing down halls. Carl arrived 2 days later, camera slung but unused, this story too intimate for lenses. Tom rallied for a week, demanding grilled cheese from the cafeteria, none of that Jell-O slop, and story hours from the letters. This one's got heat. He'd grunt at a particularly steamy passage, winking at Carl till Dean flushed crimson. Laughter punctuated the beeps, a defiant soundtrack. Then, quiet as a sigh, Tom slipped away. Midnight, with Dean dozing at bedside, Carl's hand on his shoulder. The family gathered in the hall like sentinels. No fanfare, just absence. The monitors flatlining to elegy. Tom's face serene as if he'd finally fixed the unfixable. The funeral was quintessentially Whitaker. VFW hall rented, flag-draped casket, a bugler playing taps that tore at Dean's resolve. Eulogies flowed, Ray's gruff anecdotes of plant pranks, Linda's tearful psalms, Mia's drawing of a truck ascending starry roads. Dean spoke last, letters in hand. Dad hid my love once, fearing it'd break me, but he learned late but true that it mends. These words, our bridge. After, the house on Elm Street echoed empty, but not hollow. They gathered for the reading, lawyer crisp in suit, Ray co-signing the deed as promised. The estate split equitable, house to Dean and Ray joint, savings divvied with care for Mia's college, a trust for the boy's future. Tom's scrawl noting no strings, live loud. Months blurred to spring, cherry blossoms carpeting the backyard like confetti. Dean and Carl married in a quiet city hall ceremony. Rainbow rings exchanged, Marisol officiating with flair, Theo belting at last off-key. Honeymoon in the Keys. Conch shells and sunsets, Carl's photos capturing Dean's joy unshadowed. Back home, they renovated the loft, walls opening to light, a nook for letters. now a growing archive. Tom's, Dean's, Carl's vows inked on linen. Aunt Linda visited, Mia in tow, the girl demanding, "Write me a love letter to my Teddy." One evening, as fireflies danced beyond the fire escape, Dean pulled Carl close. "Think Dad's reading ours up there? Judging the grammar." Carl laughed, nuzzling his neck. "Nah, he's tending the fire, proud as hell." And in the quiet, with the city humming lullabies, Dean believed it. Love not hidden, but heralded, an engine roaring eternal.